Hi everyone, welcome back to Caitlin's Corner. Today I am going to be planting up a beautiful fairy garden with this gorgeous grafted pussy willow. So this plant is new to me, but I am so excited about it. I love pussy willow in floral arrangements, and I love how it can look in really beautiful, lush, large landscapes. This weeping pussy willow, or Salix caprea pendula, is a stunning bonsai choice because of its naturally flowing branches and early spring catkins. It grows quickly and responds well to pruning, which makes it a great choice for beginners and experienced bonsai gardeners. So the way that this weeping pussy willow gets its shape is by grafting. These branches are grafted onto a pussy willow trunk, and that gives it the weeping habit. So this trunk is not, and spray is not its original structure. If you think about the branches that you might see in a florist shop or in your local grocery store, those are actually what are taken, cut, and grafted onto this rootstock in order to make it a short creation. So a little bit about pussy willows and their respect to different cultures and traditions and folklores. So I purchased this around the time of the Chinese New Year, which was in early mid-January. And in Chinese culture, they are often seen as a sign of good fortune. Now in Eastern Europe, they are replaced with palm branches around the Easter tradition and often blessed in churches and then brought into homes as a sign of safety and hope. Native Americans have always valued the willow for its medicinal properties. They utilize the bark, which contains salsin, for a bunch of different medical remedies. Now, today, pussy willows are still a continuous part of folklore, seasonal recognition. I think it's something that a lot of people associate with fairy tales and princesses. I know I do. And so I have just always loved the beautiful weeping habit of it that's magical and ethereal. So this one came with this card, and it calls the pussy willow the tree of enchantment. So I will read you what it states because I think it is very fitting for a lot of us to maybe understand this or have this and then have this as a reminder. So it states, the weeping pussy willow is among the most graceful of trees. It is connected with all that is feminine dreaming, intuition, emotion, enchantment, healing, and revitalization. The willow has long been recognized as a sacred tree by poets, philosophers, and religious leaders because of the flexibility of its twigs. The willow's flexibility symbolizes resilience and inspires us to move with life rather than resisting what we are feeling. I thought this was beautiful when I saw it. When I purchased it, it was the twigs with the catkins on it, and it has since started to flesh out into bloom. But I immediately was drawn to it just from the idea of knowing that it was a pussy willow, thinking that it was beautiful. But then after reading this card and seeing what it is connected with in terms of kind of lore, and then the symbolism of resilience, and kind of going with the flow, that really resonated with where I am at in my life. And I think that having these types of visual reminders around our home is very helpful. So whatever that means to you in terms of those types of visual reminders, I say go for it. For me, I love having plants and art. And so I love that this plant says all of this. I had to get it for that reason. And because I had this idea that I get to put together with you today. So this card also states, legend has it that Willow is bestowed with a magical power capable of fulfilling wishes. For a wish to be granted, ask permission of the willow, explaining your desire. Then select a pliable shoot, tie a loose knot, expressing your wish. When your wish is fulfilled, return and untie the knot. Remember to thank the willow for your gift. So I love the symbolism of that. And we will be doing that as part of our little fairy garden as well. Right, so now that we have talked about our willow, let's talk a little bit about some of the other plants that I have here. I have this Calathea yellow fusion. I have a couple different varieties of fern, two smaller ones and then this larger one. I will place the names of each of these three on the screen. I have a Enjoy Pothos, and then I have a just plain old green ivy here, English ivy. I also have my little fairy here. Now, she is a little bit cracked and broken, unfortunately, because right before I was going to film this, she kind of fell and broke. So we have some chips on her that we are going to kind of strategically place amongst plants, so hopefully you don't see it. And in the meantime, I'm going to attempt to find another one of her at Home Goods where I purchased her to replace her with, because I love her. I think she's so cute with her little flower on her head, and she has a little flower skirt. So yeah, a little bummed by it, but we'll try and find another one that's not totally repaired and all cracked up, hopefully. Alrighty, so let's get planting. I am not going to use all of these plants that I shared with you, and by all I mean the entirety of the plant. I do plan on kind of pulling apart some of these and only using bits and pieces of them in here, because this would be way too small of a container to accommodate all of that, but I do want all of the different textures. So this is a container that I picked up when I was at Franco's a few weeks ago. It just has kind of a birch bark outer layer, and then that is nailed or glued onto various little wood pieces. And it does have a plastic liner. So I am going to be very careful with watering this, and we'll talk about water after we get this planted. Once again, I am going to be using the Edna's Best potting mix from E.B. Stone. It is one of my favorites. And then we'll be pulling everything apart and placing it in here. So let's get started. So now the last thing that I'm going to do before I call this finished is add in some sheet moss here. And I'm really only going to do that here on this back section that I decided not to plant because I have the idea that maybe I want to change this up. And then this is the front, and I put a little fairy house right here with a pathway, or I put a set of table and chairs here with a little, you know, I don't know, rocks or something like that. I have a whole set of various fairy garden elements that I purchased at the Dollar Tree a few weeks ago, and they weren't entirely my aesthetic. So I want to take them and elevate them a little bit, which will be coming in a future video once I decide exactly how I want to execute that. But I have a thought process, I have a plan in my head of what I want to do and how I want to do it. So that will be coming soon. But again, I am someone that likes to kind of switch things up, move around my florals, move around my plants. That way nothing feels too stagnant or stuck. And I really kind of just do that all the time. So I think it's also a good way to not spend extra money, because if you're moving something around and using it in a different way than you have been, then that really helps for the budget conscious, which I try to be. So now that we have finished our container, let's talk some care. So in general, for pussy willows, out into the landscape, they like full sun. However, if you live in a more dry and hot environment, you might consider putting them in a spot where they would receive afternoon shade. Now, all of these we are considering as houseplants in my case with this container. As I mentioned before, I am in a zone 10B, so pothos, ivy, ferns, and calathea all can be considered as plants that I could put out into the landscape because we have a relatively temperate climate. All of them will want to be in a bit of shade, definitely in the afternoon. But in a houseplant container situation such as this, all of these prefer bright indirect light. So a great place to put them would be right next to a window that gets lots and lots of sunlight. In terms of water, so I am going to, like with most plants, I'm going to keep the soil moist, not soggy, sopping wet, and I'm going to try to keep it from drying out all the way to the bottom of the container. Having the first inch to 2 inches of this dry out is about perfect. So that's kind of what your rule of thumb is with containers, is let the first couple of inches dry out, then water. Now with regards to fertilizers, pussy willows and bonsais definitely are going to want fertilizer. Your house plants such as these do prefer a fertilizer in the growing season, so think spring to fall. And what I'm going to be using is the houseplant fertilizer that I always use. I will put that up on the screen now. And I'm going to just do that monthly from spring in through fall until we hit winter while all of this is growing. And I'll be doing that on a monthly cadence. So lastly here in terms of care is styling. So you are going to want to prune up your bonsais. And there are 3 key things that you want to do. So I will read those off to you. So the first thing is going to be encouraging your weeping form. So by enhancing the natural droop of your branches, you're going to selectively prune upward growing shoots and allow all the downward hanging ones to dominate. Next, you can use wiring for shape. So you can train young branches to guide their direction in either down or out, or which one whichever way that you might want to. So as an example of this one, if you wanted to pull this cane back a little bit, you could put wire up here, wrap it around, and direct it this direction. And then lastly, keep it with an open structure. And this goes for a lot of plants. Most plants want open, airy structures so that that doesn't give them the opportunity to harbor or get any sort of fungal diseases. Now let's talk some common issues and solutions for your weeping pussy willows. Oftentimes they can have yellowing leaves. So this can be a sign of overwatering or poor drainage. So make sure that you do not overwater this. Check your soil to see the condition of it, how wet it is. And then in the case like I have it where this container does not drain, you're going to want to be extra diligent about making sure that the soil doesn't stay soppy, soggy, wet. Typically, what would be the best way to have one of these bonsais is in a draining container or even in a bonsai container specifically. All right, so now that we have gone over care, let's do our little ceremony of making a wish and tying our knot in the branch. So there you have it, a really beautiful fairy garden container with this ethereal weeping pussy willow. You know all the care tips. You saw how I planted this up. Hopefully it inspired you and got you feeling a little bit invigorated for spring. I know I can't wait for spring. I am so excited to start planting more and get some of these projects that I've got stored up in my head out and working in the yard. And I hope that the wishes that you made as I made this knot in this pussy willow, I hope all of them come true. I know we all kind of need that hope right now. So I hope that this brings you that peace and hope and inspiration to keep going, be resilient, follow your dreams. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.